Welcome into another week of Every Day We're Covering. Chris Parks, SJ Munoz with you once again to talk some college football and talk some wagering. Unfortunately, we didn't hear that cash register ring too much this past week with our picks, but we didn't go over, so it's not a total loss. We're treading water a little bit, but it kind of just goes to show you, you're going to have your boom weeks, you're going to have your bust weeks, and we just kind of had one of those here this week.
We might need more like that tumbleweed sound, the Old West. Maybe it was kind of more like our our hits this week. But like you said, wasn't a total bagel, but was maybe here do a little bit better this week. And it's kind of just got to put it behind you. Like you said, you're gonna take your L's. You just gotta move on and try to do better next week.
Yep, that's all you can do is try again. And of course, that's another thing I guess maybe we could touch on a little bit too. We've got a couple of, I guess, gambling related things we wanted to bring up, but this is another one I just thought of. Sometimes you kind of get that itch during the day when things aren't going your way like that. I don't know how you are, but I'm watching some of those and I'm like, oh man, you start looking through the late games. You're like, I got to find something else. And sometimes you just have to tap the brakes and get yourself away from it from a little bit because, sometimes you're just compounding the problem rather than fixing it. So, it works sometimes, but other times I think you just walk away. And that's kind of what I did this weekend. I was looking at some later. I'm like, you know what? It's not my day. I'm just gonna stop here for today.
No, for sure. Especially if you're, kind of I'd say for me, being a competitive person, anybody that's competitive, you just kind of, it's almost like that hurts more than the money sometimes, depending on the amount, obviously, if you're throwing some, big dollars out there, might be a different, your different reason kind of causing your emotions. But for me, a lot of it's just, I don't like to be wrong in these situations, especially feeling like you have a good handle on it or as good a handle as you could have. Obviously it's all a crapshoot, as they say. But sometimes you just got to put that phone down, or don't make that drive out to the book and just say, all right, well, live to fight another day, and we'll maybe do a little research or just cool off for a minute and try it again in a couple of days or maybe even another week or so.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to touch on another thing, gambling related wise, here in just a moment. But as we do always, as we get the program started, we talk about the beverages that we're kind of sipping on here as the show rolls along. And unfortunately, I'm letting the folks down here today. The crew kind of hit a little bit of a virus here this weekend. We don't know what the hell it is, but none of us felt very good over the weekend. I spent most of it just kind of lounging around in bed watching football, which was okay with me. It's not a bad activity.
Pretty good day, but besides the sickness, clear it. Obviously, it's not that virus that we don't talk about anymore. At least you found that out. So at least you're just it's some kind of a cold. But that kind of stinks. But I'll maybe I'll do a double drink here for you. But I'm doing the KC beer tonight. It's a BIER. I know they're one of the bigger names here in town, and I went with I got a Bavarian style wheat ale. If you're not familiar with them, German style is kind of like their thing. They obviously have a lot of different options, from a Pilsner to a lager, even an IPA. I think they even got like some type of spritzer thing they make, which, that's kind of one of the trends these days, going with the seltzer type lighter drinks. But I got the wheat ale, and then I also might just kind of help you out there, and I know you'd like to enjoy something too, so I might suck down this German style Pilsner as well. So right. I'll let you know if I crack that one, but kind of guess depends how the picks go. If we keep talking about our losses from last week, I might be on 3 and 4 here pretty soon.
Hitting the other ones. Yeah. we went to the nostalgia comfort route with finding some soda that we hadn't had for a long time, and I busted out the Ruby Red Squirt. So that's what's getting me along here today.
Can't go wrong with some Squirt. Yeah. Maybe you throw a little whiskey in there, dash a NyQuil, and you'll be good by morning.
That might be what I need to do.
I can't say I haven't done that before. Sometimes I feel a little under the weather, a little bit of Theraflu with maybe a little American honey whiskey. It'll put you right out. You'll feel like $1 million in the morning.
Get that hard sleep you need.
Yeah.
Another quick topic we wanted to touch on gambling wise, since we didn't have the best weekend out there, but we hit a couple. And something that you brought up as we were talking before we recorded here is, sometimes even though maybe you didn't do great overall on the ledger as far as the W and L columns are concerned, maybe you were sticking your kind of hedging your bets with a little bit more coin on a certain game than another. Maybe you felt better about another one and had a little bit more into it. And that's something we really haven't talked about a lot. Sometimes maybe some of those are ones that are kind of your less confident bets and you're not putting as much money on it. And maybe it works out okay in the long run that way.
Yeah, exactly. And even to the point we've even kind of adding into that on top of that is just there's certain times, like we've talked about, different states and different laws, regarding where and when you can bet. So oftentimes, we might have a play like we record Sunday night just to kind of be out there in full transparency here. Obviously, the games don't, for not till in some cases Saturday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it may be. But you may end up getting a different number or something that changes your mind on a spread or maybe even an over under just to give yourself some more value. So I mean, being as I don't normally, the bet's not a lot of times isn't played by the time we make the call on here. We can't exactly just say, oh, this is how much we're doing on this bet, but we can maybe add, help out the listeners a little bit and just say, this is one we're feeling really strongly about. So, if you kind of lining up with us, this may be one that you want to throw a little bit more on compared to some other ones where, especially earlier in the week, we got the Maction and, Conference USA. A lot of that's for fun on our end. We'll just, like, I mean, I enjoy watching them making the plays, but it may not be something where we're going to put a lot of money down on that. Would just be in the variables and not, not the typical teams that we follow. But it's, we're glad to make picks on those games as well. Just kind of just, giving a little bit more, behind the curtain here, so to speak, to kind of our mindset on things.
Well, and of course, I think folks have probably come to understand that if they've listened to us already, but we're kind of more of your everyday working man's kind of gambler as well. We're not talking about K's and kind of bets here. We're going pretty low most of the time, and especially some of those ones where you're just having a little fun. Heck, even a $5 bet on a Tuesday night in a MAC game is just enough to have a little fun with it. So that's kind of putting in perspective too. Just depending on what kind of person you want to be, that's obviously every person's their decision how they want to go with it. If there's somebody that feels comfortable putting a lot of money out there and that they have it to play with, great, have fun with it. But that's just kind of not how we typically roll. But yeah, we'll try to maybe enlighten you on some of them that we maybe feel a little bit better about, and that might help the overall weekends too. Looking back at last week, we'll just do a quick rundown here for you. The early plays in the week, I know, didn't quite go our way. You had the special FIU pick, and there was something about this game too that was a little bit awkward that made it even a little bit worse of a hit.
Yeah, had I known the alternate uniform was going to be in play, I never would have made this pick. But that's the way it goes. That we talk about the things you can't control and the things that you just don't know about, and I'll put that on the list. Obviously, kind of tongue in cheek there, but at the same time, it seems very rare that teams do win with a special alternate uniforms. I know, certain squads, Oregon being one in particular, obviously change your uniform basically on a weekly basis. But, it just seems like whenever there's that big, you kind of talked about last week of being, in person, of kind of feeling that moment, kind of being in that moment and just kind of blowing it out, making it a big deal. And sometimes it works in your favor, but it does seem like, I don't have a stat on this, so find the numbers, shoot me a message, tell me I'm wrong. But it does seem like whenever there's some type of a really stark change to a uniform, it just seems like it doesn't go well. There's obviously no science on my end to this, but it seems that way more than not. Maybe we just notice it more. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting to me too is for the team that I follow, Iowa State, they've done this with the black, all black uniforms for quite a few years, and oddly enough, it's worked in their favor. They have a pretty dang good record when they wear them, so I don't know what the luck is there or something. And last week when they wore the special uniforms to honor Jack Trice, and now everybody was saying they weren't wearing any pants on the field, which I didn't know until later after I was not at the game. But it worked out.
What you do on the weekend is your business. That's the way I look at it. So
exactly. It was kind of funny going back and look at some of those comments. It was definitely a different perspective on TV than it was in person. I'll tell you that.
Hey, that's the good side of social media, if you ask me. That's having fun, things like that. I can get behind that. Those pictures like that. So give me that all day. Besides these, Logan Paul boxing matches, get that crap out of here. So
no joke. Yeah, the get the Miami Vice unis out of the world
that
here.
Too, yeah. add that to the list. Yeah.
Yeah. They got beat 27-14. We lost that one. We lost on Tuesday night too because App State didn't do too well against Coastal Carolina. They lost that one close game, 27-24. And then talk about your all-time bad beats on Thursday night. West Virginia came all the way back to get the lead against Houston, and then they allow the almighty Hail Mary to come raining down on them at the end of the game. Houston comes up with an incredible catch in the end zone, and they win the game. And, of course, that ruins the cover because West Virginia was given a little bit of points. I think it was 3.5 is what I had it at, and it's like, oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I don't think bad beats doesn't even begin to cover that. And, where's that damn John Denver when you really need him?
Exactly. Get those country roads going the right direction for goodness
Yeah, that was
sake.
crazy. That's one of those. I mean, that's kind of just a perfect example of I guess it depends on what side you're on, but I mean, it still kind of makes things interesting. Obviously, you don't want to lose the game, but it's just like, man, it's kind of like mind blowing. You're like, how does this even happen? Like, what the hell? Like, literally, what the hell?
It's just such a horrible way to lose, Your team, especially, I mean, this game may be a little bit different because West Virginia played like crap for a good chunk of the game. Had to rally back to get ahead, but especially when you've felt like you played a pretty good game. You're playing maybe a competitive game against a really good team, and then that's how they win the game. Like, you just feel like, come on, like this is just sheer luck. This wasn't like, if you would have drove it down the field and rammed it down my throat, then I could have accepted it. But just heaving one up in the air and somebody bounces off of two helmets and you catch it, it's like it does not feel good. That's for sure.
Well, it's even, obviously an extreme case, but one of those situations too where everybody knows exactly what's coming on that play, and somehow it still works. Like, I mean, you can barely do that on freaking Madden, let alone in real life. Like, come on.
Well, and kids are always taught to try to knock it down and those kinds of things, and most of the time you see players trying to do those kinds of things, but even in those situations, you've seen some rare instances where there's a guy that's maybe lower than them. It bounces off of him when they're trying to knock it down, and they still catch it. It's just wild things can happen, and I guess that's like you said, what makes the game of football kind of fun sometimes. But yeah, that was a rough one to take for sure on Thursday. And then go to our weekend picks, and we'll just rally through here for you. Ohio State did get the cover 20.5. They were given it at Purdue. They won that one 41-7. One that kind of made me scratch my head, Maryland took an absolute dump against Illinois, and they ended up losing the game 27-24. They were giving 14. I didn't see that one coming at all, the way Illinois had played.
It seemed like overlooking type of situation. It's about the only thing that makes sense because, I mean, a lot of people are pretty high on Maryland. Obviously, they're in a tough division. They're not going to really make a run for that, but definitely one of the, top 4 or 5 teams in the whole conference. And, well, we thought so at least.
Yeah.
They still got some work to do because you lose a game like that. Who knows,
exactly.
how the rest of the season is going to play out. But, yeah, that was definitely a surpriser and kind of a little bit, I mean, for their end and their fan base, I'm sure, kind of a disappointing type of game where it should have been a pretty comfortable win, but then you end up, you might struggle and you pull it out late, but on top of that, you end up losing outright. Makes it even that much more kind of. I'm sure they're going to be looking at that kind of towards the end of the season when it comes to maybe your bowl placement or where you end up playing the postseason. That's going to be one that's not looked upon well by those bowl committees and things of that sort.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of that Ohio State hangover from the week before. Who knows? But another one that went the way opposite direction is what you had called BYU was getting 5 at TCU, and they needed a lot more than that. 44-11. TCU finally woke up and played a game. I don't know where that one came from either because they had been a team that was kind of reeling the other direction.
Yeah, they freaking barely scored 5, let alone get 5. I mean, jeez. Yeah, I'm kind of done with them. They're on the list of teams to stay away from my perspective because they've let me down a couple times here this season. But obviously they don't care what I pick. But at the same time, I don't give a crap about them anymore either. So we'll go ahead and put them on the bad list for now, at least for me. But yeah, I think that's more of the TCU we thought we might see this season, and I really would have liked to have seen that in the first week of the season for obvious reasons. But is what it is.
No doubt. Auburn was giving 12 at LSU. I had that one, and it was looking fairly good for quite a while, but then LSU just kind of turned it up in the fourth quarter. I think they scored 3 times in the fourth quarter to really pull away. 48-18 ended up being the final, so we lost out on that one. Wyoming did cover against Air Force. They were getting 9.5, and they only lost by 7, 34-27. So nice picture there by SJ. And then Miami, boy, they tried to get the late backdoor cover there. They were moving down the field. They were getting 3.5 at North Carolina, but ended up being a 10-point win for the Heels. And the Heels really did control a good chunk of that game. They played really well. So that was kind of an interesting game, too. I thought there was a good lot of back and forth in that game early, but North Carolina showed a little something to me. They do have a couple of nice playmakers out there on the edge, and obviously everybody thinks pretty highly of their quarterback, too. So they're a team to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking was more that Miami could maybe out-athlete them, so to speak, and it was kind of the opposite, honestly, like at the in the big moment especially. So, yeah, this didn't go our way on that one. That's about all I got to say about that. But Wyoming, man, basically the opposite of BYU for me this season. I'm rolling with them Cowboys as many chance I get. They've helped the account there a couple times, so I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's how our picks went last week, and then we're going to touch here on a couple of big games here this week, and then we'll get into our picks, of course, this week. But one game that obviously was a big highlight of the weekend, and I think it certainly lived up to the billing. And I found it hard to believe that they said that this was the first time in that rivalry between Oregon and Washington that they were both top 10 teams when they played, which is pretty amazing, I think, in their own right, because they both have had good runs in their history. But yeah, heck of a game. Washington ends up pulling it out at the end of the contest. It was very much back and forth. Both teams had kind of gone seesawing early in the game. Then it looked like for a while that Oregon maybe kind of had control of the game. And maybe what some people would consider some questionable decisions coaching-wise, whether to go for it. They did go for it there before giving the ball back to Washington to give them a little bit shorter field to get the go-ahead score. And, that's kind of the way they play it. And that's what he kind of said after the game, too, is that's who I am, that's who I'm going to be. But certainly it's kind of tough to swallow sometimes when it backfires on you.
Yeah, I think probably the perspective is, maybe – kind of the critical, component to this conversation, being just either way, not really. I mean, a good game, obviously. I enjoyed watching it, but not having a dog in the fight, so to speak. I kind of say, first reaction is, what are you doing here? Like, what is this even like? Are you trying to win the game? Or are you trying to lose the game? Because honestly, it looked like you're basically, giving them the ball at midfield with a lot of people's Heisman front runner and saying, go 50 yards on me. That ain't much of a challenge, honestly, to give somebody the ball right there with plenty of time to work with. So you see that perspective, and that's just somebody that's not invested in that program at all. Obviously their fans are used to kind of that, a little bit more of a, I guess, whatever, gunslinger mentality or, Texas, Texas Hold'em, riverboat gambler, whatever term you want to put on a type thing where, they go for 2 in the first quarter, they, fake a lot of punts, things of that sort. That program as a whole, even before this current coach was there, they've kind of been known for that, just, running up the score or getting points where any way you can. So maybe, I don't know, many Oregon fans, maybe their fans are okay with this. I'm sure they wanted to get the win, but, maybe a day or two later, they kind of say, well, that's just like the coach said, that's how we play the game. And you got to accept it. If you go up playing the game and doing what you do, you got to just accept the loss and move on.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic because another thing that I heard during the broadcast that Herb Street brought up was the fact that, how much does that also influence his players and his team? Because you hear that a lot, like, well, it shows that he trusts his guys or, those kinds of things. And I think a lot of that has to do with what goes on during the week in practice. And I'm sure you have those discussions like about those scenarios. Hey guys, this is going to be our mindset. This is the kind of things that we're probably going to do more often, because you're not just going to throw it up in the middle of the game and surprise your own guys like, oh, we're going to go for it. It's something that they're going to work on and practice. But and maybe that is part of it. That they buy into that and they're ready to kind of try to execute some of those plays. But yeah, certainly you have to live with it when it goes wrong. And there were multiple points throughout that game where both teams made those types of decisions. They both decided not to kick field goals multiple times. I mean, Oregon had a heck of a goal line stand at the
exactly.
1 there earlier in the game. So it just, yeah, I mean, both teams definitely rolled the dice, and that last one certainly is amplified because, like you said, you give one of the best players in the country the ball back with a short field to go win it, and that's what he did. It only took him 3 plays later, and he was putting the ball on the money.
Yeah, I think it's just basically like we kind of said. It's your perspective on the things. I'd be fine if if that's the way you play, kind of going out on your shield, I guess so to speak. I'd be fine lose. I mean, kind of that's the way we play. That's who we are. I'm fine with that mindset. But just as a outside observer, I think there's just certain situation where it's like this is kind of cut and dry.
Yeah.
Like no matter what, like I know you have your certain, because like you said, a lot of things might be okay. If we're inside the 40, we're going for it.
Mm-hmm.
A 4th and short, 4th and less than 3 or 4. Okay, you might say something like that, or even have some trick plays ready, or even a certain 3rd down plays where it's like we run this on 3rd and long, we get within 2 or 3, we're gonna go for it after that.
Mm-hmm.
There's scenarios, and all these obsessive coaches have their sheets and everything. Like they got they got everything they want or can think of, every scenario possible, but I think there's still certain things that are just with the game on line in that situation. I still think you do got to punt, but that's his team if they're willing to live with that. And I haven't heard much backlash. Obviously, it's only been a day or so, but at least from inside, the program, it's no AD saying anything or president. So I mean, he's off to a hell of a start. So you got to give him a little bit of time.
Well, and maybe too that mindset might almost cloud your judgment within the game. If that's something that you like to do all the time, you're doing it well. Maybe you did execute a couple times earlier in the game. You think, even though you're maybe then at the spot at the end of the game where it's like, yeah, I probably would normally do this, but you've had some success earlier in the game that might just kind of sway you, like, let's go ahead and do it. We've done it before, and maybe it just kind of gets you in the wrong mindset to kind of think clearly in that big moment, and certainly seemed like that maybe was kind of the case, but especially the spot on the field that they were at. I mean, outside of the decisions, though, I mean, what more could you ask from those two quarterbacks?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Bo Nix and Michael Penix were on fire. Like, some of the throws that both of them made were just incredible and right on the money. It lived up to what we wanted. And, yeah, those two teams have definitely a lot of explosive players, and both at the quarterback spot and then on the outside. And it was fun to watch them go up and down. And again, another one of those unfortunate situations for the Pac-12. Boy, this would have been a good highlight for you 2 years ago, but here it is this year, in essentially a preview of a Big Ten contest.
Yeah, that was kind of one popular narrative out there that people were getting a kick out of. But just kind of wrap up this conversation. I do think at times the sheets and the analytics, so they want to call it, and the numbers, it kind of gets the best of you at times. We've talked about it just with making these little small bets here that we make, and just kind of having a gut feeling and a feel for the game in this case, with the coach being on the sideline, and kind of sometimes you just got to go with how it feels, and whether that sheet says go for 2 or go for it or punt or whatever, you should know your team better than anybody, and be able to gauge that. So I kind of think that's just my final thought on it. If he's willing to live with that, and that was kind of whether it's on a sheet or hopefully with his instincts, just lean on that, and that's that's what you gotta go with, and that's the way they're gonna have success or not have success. And I'm good with that if you put it out there like that. And I didn't hear many excuses or anything like that, so that's the good side of it.
Yeah, no doubt. Just a couple of other quick notes on other games that were good over the weekend that I thought was fun to kind of keep an eye on. We were paying attention to that game between Notre Dame and USC. That was one that people wanted to watch in that nightcap, and Notre Dame really kind of took care of business. I mean, a lot of people gave the Caleb Williams factor, I think, a little bit too much emphasis in that game, and Notre Dame really didn't have much of a problem putting them away.
That was definitely a letdown. I guess it gave me time to do something else my evening before the late games kicked off. But yeah, there wasn't much worth watching there, and it's kind of one of those, I guess, pounding home the point again of just being how important playing defense in football still is. Without a defense, you pretty much don't have anything when it comes to the game of football. I mean, you have the best receivers you want, everybody's son, grandson, nephew, niece, whatever you got on your team, junior, the third, the second. It doesn't matter if you can't, tackle. And then on top of that, run the ball too. If you can't do those two things, you're not going to even have a foundation to build off. So good luck to them, but it could be they still got quite a few tough matchups left yet. Excuse me. So they got a lot of work cut out for them still, regardless of what they have at quarterback and a couple of the skilled players. It could be a long season by the end of the year here.
Yeah, we did see a couple of other results too that kind of were that stark reminder that we've always touched on is week to week, it's hard. You got to go out every week and put your best foot forward. We saw some scores that, probably turned some people's heads. Maybe not just that they lost, but the way that they lost. Washington State being one of them. They got run by Arizona. 44-6 was the final in that game. Louisville, coming off that big win over Notre Dame, they step on their toes against Pitt, 38-21. Just a couple of examples of, you can't let that previous week influence you the next week. You got to be ready to turn the page and go play some football, and those two teams certainly did not.
Yeah, major letdown there. I guess they should have, Jack Harlow needs to be at every game. Otherwise, it's just not a good night. So, it's tough to win, but at the same time, it's, the more that I think to me, a lot of that more is with the focus internally has more to do with your team than it does the other team. Because, I know we don't play the games on paper and, you can look at all the stats and compare the scores, but at the same time, talent is talent. If you have more talent, it happens. I get it, but it's still it's a really big letdown when something like that happens when you're obviously the more talented team by far. You go from beating a one loss top 10 or top 15 Notre Dame team to losing to a 2-win outfit the next week. I think that just says more about you. No disrespect to the other team, but that's more about you than it is them.
Yeah. One game end of it I just wanted to bring up because I thought it was interesting as I'm watching it. I'm thinking Miami all over again in my head as I'm seeing this. But they did it right. And it was not the most exciting game in the world. The only reason I was paying attention to it was because I had it in the middle of a parlay, and it ended up not going my way. But Rutgers.
What did I tell you about these parlays?
I know. I got to stay away from
I'm just kidding. We all do it.
I know. It's all our side fun. Yeah. Never works out usually. Rutgers came back and beat Michigan State. They were losing most of the game. They came storming back in the second half, really started to run the ball well. And then they had the ball with just a few minutes left. And, Michigan State, had they been able to stop them, would have been able to get the ball back and had a chance. Well, Rutgers got a couple of quick first downs on a couple of nice runs. And then the timing was almost synced up perfectly where, they could maybe run out the clock. And they handled it really well. I was pretty impressed with the way that Greg Schiano and the staff did it because they were paying close attention. They even took a timeout at one point when they needed to kind of reset themselves and say, hey, guys, this is where we are, what we need to do. And their quarterback on two different occasions in that last drive, kind of walked himself back, took that extra few seconds off the clock that they needed, and that last play that they had, they got just under the 40 before the play clock reset, and there you go. There's the ball game. Exactly the opposite of the kind of thing that Miami was doing the week before they got criticized for. So just interesting to see a team kind of go through that and do it the right way.
Yeah, it seems simple, but it's not as simple as you'd think, and just with the emotion and, kind of just getting caught up in the moment and just, I don't know. Sometimes I think we've all been there. You get in those situations where you just kind of, it's almost like surreal. You just can't, you see, what's happening, but you just, for some reason, your body don't do what your mind wants it to, you know what I mean? But we've all been there. But the only other game I noticed that, we got to throw out there was a beautiful Friday night affair with, Stanford coming back from 29 points down. That was amazing. The only unfortunate thing about it was so late that I'm sure a lot of people, because, it was third quarter when they were still 29. I know it was at least in the half. Yeah. But, it was later in the contest. You're like, there's no way they're coming back. Yeah. So why would you stay up? Yeah. But I know a lot of people woke up to, some good news there on Saturday morning. So you like that. And it couldn't happen to a better team on top of that.
Oh, so. I know. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and the game didn't even kick off Central Time until 9 o'clock. So I mean, it's hard to believe anybody was paying attention to that point, anyways. But that's just the nature of the way stupid TV is. But yeah, that was interesting, and I guess it does kind of bring up too. I don't want to harp on this forever, but because it's been beaten into the ground. But obviously the whole week before scenario with Shadur doing the watch thing to the Arizona State students. I mean, it's like I'm all for having fun and kids being able to like celebrate and do some things. But that in that context to me makes absolutely zero sense. Like none of those students, yeah, okay, they don't care. They're all on loans right now to go to school. Like, congratulations, you got a fancy watch. Like, I don't care, dude. Like, that's not a flex on me.
Well, not only that, that was also a situation where you're, supposedly the better team, just by what you've accomplished this year, and you barely, eke out a win against a lesser foe, and you're feeling yourself after that. It's more about, like you said, context and perspective. There's just lacking, but yeah, it was nice to see a little bit. They're probably never going to have humble pie, but as close to it as they can get, because that just doesn't exist in that family. But I was glad to see him get embarrassed, and I'll be a Stanford fan for at least another rest of the season at least. So congrats to them. That was beautiful.
That was beautiful. And it's such a double standard with what he's got going on there too, because he talks about, and some of the things you probably would like as a fan, like that he is kind of strict on what guys, they need to be here at certain times, they need to do this at certain executing practice and all that. But then you let that other noise just go on without any checking of it at all. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't jive together. But yeah, good to see him eat some humble pie. That's for sure. We're gonna move on now here into our picks here for this week. So hopefully we're gonna turn this train around here for you.
Hope we got it. It's in the bag. Yeah, start counting those chips already. Let's go.
Well, one of them I know we agreed on here to start the week because you always gotta love to get those juices flowing early in the week. We've got a Tuesday night contest, and Liberty is laying 14 against Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee has had a little bit of a rough season, especially compared to their standards. They're usually one of those teams that's kind of annoying, that jumps up and bites people a couple times during the year. But Liberty's been playing pretty good lately. Middle Tennessee's taken a couple cuff losses. I like Liberty there to get your juices wet here early in the week.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those just keep the confidence going, maybe even a slump buster, if you will, whatever you want to label it there. Like you said, Middle Tennessee on a 3-game skid here, and Liberty's all their wins except for one have been more than 10 points, so I expect them to cover that number pretty easy. They're kind of going in opposite directions here, these two teams.
Yeah. This is one I just wanted to throw out there because they kind of surprised me on the weekend. James Madison has been playing really well here lately. This is one of those games that I'm not going to say I'm like overly confident on or anything, but maybe kind of fun just to test on Thursday night. They're laying 4 at Marshall. Being on the road makes it a little bit more difficult, but with the way that they've been playing lately, they've really kind of blown some teams out here these last couple games. So like what they're doing there. And then if you really want to continue the Secco trend and do a Friday night action as well, that old SMU team that's trying to amp up their profile before they head off to the ACC supposedly. They're laying 18.5 at Temple. Temple has got another one of those drudging seasons going along. I can never figure that program out. They seem to have like a 2-year stretch where they're like really pretty good and they're knocking teams off, and then they just absolutely hit the rock bottom once again, and that seems to be what's happened to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like goes from either, a 7 or 8, kind of show up out of nowhere. Maybe you give Miami a run or something like that, and then you don't hear from them for 3 or 4 years, and they may have won 2 or 3 games within that span. And then all of a sudden, I mean, I guess it's kind of just like a stepping stone type job, obviously, someone, a young up and coming coach, but it is kind of interesting how that's happened with so many different coaches.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that'll get us here to the weekend, so let's get to the meat of things here on Saturday. Why don't you fire us off there, start us off?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with Oklahoma. It's a pretty big number, but just the way they've played this year, I like them covering the 18 against Central Florida. Besides that Texas game, Oklahoma's victories are by at least 14 points, so you could see that. And then also UCF winless in the conference, just kind of maybe a timing thing on top of it, but just besides when they played Texas, and obviously they looked good in that game, but Oklahoma's kind of just been rolling people. So I expect that trend to continue in this contest here. So take maybe if you want to weight it, 6 out of 10 confidence here on Oklahoma covering that 18.
Yeah. Well, and the other reason I kind of like it even more on top of that is they're coming off a bye week too, so they've had some time to heal themselves up and be prepared to rout them.
Get off that emotional high of that game with Texas. So yeah,
no doubt. Another one I'll throw out at you here, and this is also was a big number, but and I'm hoping there's not the letdown. There is a little bit of a worry here. But Carolina, the way they played in that game against Miami, I'm hoping they can continue to ride that high. They're laying 23.5 against Virginia, a team that really, really has struggled here this season. So, I think if UNC's halfway focused and goes out there and uses their talent, they shouldn't have a problem covering a big number like that. And I like the Heels to pull that one out.
The team we talked about here, a few minutes ago at length, I like Oregon minus 19, another big number. I'd say, just for confidence wise, I'll go 7 out of 10 on this one. Oregon's last week was their lowest output this season, and they still scored 33. So, I mean, like we said, they take the risks and they get the rewards. So, credit to them. So they do it. And then Washington State's basically kind of going backwards, and who knows what happened to their offense. 17 points 2 weeks ago, and like we mentioned earlier, 44-6 drubbing from Arizona. So they got some problems. It's kind of probably a bad time to get Oregon if there is if I don't know if there's a good time this season. They got a really good squad, but a really bad time for a Washington State team that's struggling. And Oregon's gonna be out for something to prove. I'm sure they got a lot of just a lot of pent up frustration after last week. Obviously fought to the end, but you still don't like to get those L's in the big game. So I'm sure they're gonna come out trying to prove something. I think they'll cover that minus 19.
All right, it's a good one there. I'm going to also stay in the Pac-12 here for another one here for you. Utah is getting 5.5 at USC. Now, you could look at this a number of different ways, I'm sure. You could see that, USC is ready to bounce back after the disappointment against Notre Dame. But this is a pretty good Utah team that has kind of been up and down a little bit here this year. I think by their standards, they've been disappointed in themselves a little bit. But they've had time to get healthier. They're starting to, I think, churn things out a little bit better as the season moves along, and they've kind of had USC's number here these last few years too. So getting some points in that game, I feel pretty good. I would almost even be tempted to go to the money line there and say that Utah's going to win this game. But that one I like. I'd probably go a good 7 out of 10 on that one. I feel pretty good about Utah being able to keep that game really close.
Well, who knows how USC is going to rebound after the tough loss this week as well. So that obviously, I'm sure that factored in to your pick as well. I'm going to shift over to, I guess, the Big Ten / Pac-12 because we got half the squad, half the squad going over there here soon. But we'll call it the Big Ten for now. I don't think they're going to change the name. Haven't heard anything like that, but we'll see. Wisconsin's getting -5. Excuse me. They're -5 at Illinois. Obviously, there's some background there with Bielema being over at Illinois now, former Wisconsin coach. So you kind of got to factor that in the mix. But Wisconsin, honestly, they put up some yards last week. They just weren't able to, kind of turn those into points. So I mean, that's obviously need to do that this week to kind of rebound here. And they lost a turnover battle, though. I think that's kind of where the game was won. And we've talked about even. That was one of the ones we kind of said keep an eye on. Iowa was getting 9.5. We said, I mean, obviously they won it outright, but we thought they could cover that pretty easy if hang around and the way they played the turnovers kind of ended up biting them, and that's the way Iowa plays turnovers and special teams. It's ugly, but they got the W. So I don't expect that to carry over to this week. I mean, I could see Wisconsin blowing out, being kind of like that Friday night contest they had where everyone thought it was, they were going to get a run for Purdue, and they just freaking blasted them. So I could see a scenario like that, but I'll take Wisconsin to cover the 5 points.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they recover. Tanner Mordecai did get his hand a little bit banged up early in that game and didn't play for a while in the second half, but I haven't heard what the status is. And even so, against an Illinois team, I don't think that's a huge concern for them.
They're gonna pound that cheese curd. They'll be all right.
Yeah. They totally lost that game on the opening drive of the game. They went down. They decided to go for it on a 4th down, and this play absolutely blew my mind because like you have how many people on your coaching staff, and this is something that you didn't think was going to be a problem. So they try to run kind of like a delayed handoff up the middle instead of just doing the sneak up the middle, which is fine because it's pretty hard to sneak up front against Iowa. I'll admit that they're always pretty stout up front. So they tried that, but they forgot that Cooper DeJean, the best player on Iowa's defense, was unblocked off the edge, and all he had to do was come around the outside and then grab him from behind and get him. I mean, he was untouched. Like, you didn't think that you're going to have to, like, at least get in his way if you're going to waste a few seconds handing off the ball. I couldn't believe that. I was just, like, dumbfounded at how bad you could have a play call like that in scenario. And then, yeah, they gave the ball back. They didn't score points, and that hurt them the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's kind of like the opposite of what we talked about, how being a team that maybe I'm remembering wrong, so correct me if I am, but Wisconsin hasn't been like a team known to go for it or take risks or anything like that. So you're kind of going outside of who you are, and it didn't pay off. So, I mean, I guess to the other side of it, not just to bag on Oregon, we see the other side as well. Maybe, don't try to be something you're not, is for all of us. It's good advice. Yeah. So, maybe with your football team as well. So.
Yep, no doubt. Yeah, so that'll be an interesting game, sure, to keep an eye on there. Another one I was going to throw out there, and I'm going to put a very low confidence level on this because I just don't know. But boy, BYU laid an absolute egg there against TCU. I didn't really see that coming. And they've kind of done that when we've thought maybe they would be in games earlier this year. The same thing happened against Kansas. And Texas Tech is going out there to play them. So that's the only thing that kind of scares me about this is going there because they do have a good atmosphere. And, of course, they're going to be anxious to get back on the field, I'm sure. But Tech's only laying 4.5 in that game. And Tech's played pretty decently against some pretty good teams this year, including Oregon earlier in the season. So I think that Texas Tech will be able to handle that one out at BYU. I wouldn't put a ton of confidence on it, but I do kind of like the way that one's trending. Another Pac-12 game I'll just throw out there. I didn't really have this one on my sheet to say when we were talking beforehand, but unfortunately, I think Stanford's fun probably ends after last week. UCLA, who's probably pretty horked off, they lost against Oregon State this past week, and they're only laying 16.5 at Stanford. That's going to be a team that's ready to try to put some points on the board. I would really look to hit the Bruins on that one for sure there too. So I think there's some interesting Pac-12 plays here this week. Definitely.
Yeah, we seem to stay out there pretty often, which, I mean, they're giving us a reason to watch. Stay up late, get you a little Red Bull or something late at night. Honestly, like, I'm glad that it happened, but there was no reason that they should have made that comeback last week. But I'm like I said, I'm glad it happened. I do. Last one I have, and this is honestly probably the one I'm most confident in. I think I might have failed to mention last game. Wisconsin, I'd be about an 8 out of 10 on that one. I'm pretty solid on that one. Just, I mean, part of that has to do with seeing Illinois against Nebraska, so that's part of my judgment on that. But the one I'm most confident in, I probably say, I don't want to go 10 out of 10. We can never do that. It's like a survey. When you get it at, you can never go 10 out of 10 because there's no such thing. So why is it even on there? But either way, we'll take a 9 out of 10 on this one, just for, confidence wise. I'll probably, put the most, be one of the ones I'll put the most amount of money in. Is Missouri -6. They're at home against South Carolina. Their last couple of times here in the SEC of Missouri's wins, they've won by 17. So I could see them definitely covering that. Not on top of that, you got South Carolina's just lost by 2 to Florida. So like a little bit of a, maybe a hangover effect, or kind of, just kind of letting that beat you twice maybe. And on top of that, they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. So I could see this being one of those, kind of like the opposite of LSU Auburn for us, being where, they had a kind of hanging around, but Missouri would be the team keeping it, and then they pull away at the end, kind of how LSU pull away from Auburn. I kind of see a scenario like that. And just, on top of that too, just as a, as a side note, or maybe an option for those people, for listeners to think about, is the overs on this one. Seems like maybe something that could maybe hit. 59 is what I saw for N1 book. Obviously shop around, get your best number, but I could see these teams, whatever, 41-28, 45-34, anything of that sort. I could see that happening. So maybe look at the overs as well. More confidence in Missouri covering the 6, but the overs is something I'd entertain as well. I might do so later this week too.
Yeah, and Mizzou's certainly been a surprise team here this year. They played really well. They've got themselves right in the mix there in that side of the SEC. So pretty fun to see that. That's what we've got rolling down the pike here for you this week with our picks. We hope that we have some success with you, have some fun with you, and we hope that you continue to like, share, spread the word to your friends. We certainly would like to, grow the listenership and have you give us some input as well. You can find us both on Twitter, and we welcome your comments and even if you have just suggestions or games that you think that we should maybe take a look at or pick that you feel really good about, let us know. We would certainly like to put that stuff into the program.
Hey, if you think can do better than us, drop us a line. We'll go head to head and let's have some fun. Why not? You might do so, but yeah, definitely. Whatever, Twitter is obviously where we're probably the most active with the podcast. So go ahead and on Spotify, I know you can reach out to the show as well through those means.
Yeah, it's most available there through Spotify. You also can find us on Amazon as well if you're looking through that source, and the Google Podcast should have it as well. So if you're looking at any of those places, you can find it and share it with people that use those sources, and we certainly would appreciate that. So thanks for joining us here for another week of Every Day We're Covering. That's SJ Munoz. I'm Chris Parks. We'll see you again next week for some more covers.